everybody, my name is Alex. You have heard that the Antarctic is the coldest place on the planet. But one place that is also cold is the Arctic. And today, let me introduce you to the Arctic. So here we go. Now let me talk about the Arctic. And also I will talk both of polar bears and Arctic. And so today's topic is polar bears and Arctic. Now let's first talk about the Arctic. Now I have a question for you. Where is the Arctic located? The Arctic, is in the north. But do you know what countries it covers? It covers most of the countries: Russia, Canada, Greenland, also most of Greenland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, a little bit of part of Finland, and also parts of Alaska too, and some other parts and islands and archipelagos that are there in the Arctic. And we know that the Arctic is a big place. It covers almost in the entire US, but also maybe half of the North American continent. We know that because the Arctic is big. And with that, today let me talk about it. And now we know that the Arctic is a big place, but not as many people as you think. It only have a few people, only a few populations, only such a few million of people live there. Way lesser than the US. The US today now is about 399 to 410 million people, which makes it the third largest population. But the Arctic is only to the thousands to the millions. Only about it covers it means that the Arctic is a big place, but not as many people. But also it have a lot of wildlife, a little bit. It have still in the cold, freezing cold, there are still other animals still roaming around it. For example, polar bears and seals and walruses and foxes and people. And people surround that area with lots of oceans. And that is the freezing cold point that we know today about the Arctic. Now the second thing I'm gonna tell you is about the first people that lived in the Arctic. Now you may think that the Arctic only have a few people, and it's true. But one thing you don't thought about is that inside the Arctic there is also people. But you know that there are only a few people. But still, it's also a very diverse place. And also, it makes it almost the driest area. One of the driest areas on Earth. But not as dry as though scientists have recently discovered that ice have melted in the Arctic. But let's get back to the first people that live in the Arctic. Now, let's talk about what they did in the morning, the evening, what they eat, what they wear, and their life. And what they did at night. They tell stories about the aurora borealis, the northern lights, That's Latin. And also, they tell stories about polar bears eating and the mysterious monsters in the deep sea. At daytime, they usually work. They work and hunt for breakfast and lunch, and they hunt for mostly for seals, polar bears, and wolves. They also hunt plants, but they don't really hunt plants. They live in small igloos. They also have a door at the bottom here, and here is the bottom. Here is the door, and here is the igloo, which means that it is like a basement. And we take the steps and we turn into the igloo. And inside the igloo, they also have a teeny tiny board there for icy wind not blowing inside it to keep them warm. But now they usually live in a house or an ice house now. But still, some people still follow those rules today. Now, let's get back to the Arctic people that first ruled the Arctic. And so, they hunted. Women and children hunted, while men worked and women cooked. For the children, they also worked a lot too. They also usually hunt too, but they still have a lot of fun. At night, they usually tell stories to each other. Now let's get to the afternoon and evening. Now at that time, there is the aurora borealis, and they usually like to tell stories about it. The aurora borealis is the northern lights that appear which in day and night. If you look at space on a spacecraft, then you will understand why the Earth rotates. And so the aurora borealis, and also they told stories about the polar bears too. And also at that, yes, and the aurora borealis, they told stories about monsters too. But they also still hunt and cook at the evening. They cooked for, like wolves and cattle and caribou and deer and weasels. And they usually tell stories and play together and read at night. They also learn a system how to just live to each other inside the small igloos. They also have warm blankets made from animal fur. I almost forget to tell you that they also rode in sleds. The Arctic people also rode in sleds made of dried sticks and stems, and sometimes even dogs. And they rode the sleds in the afternoon and evening, which there are dogs everywhere, and they're called sled dogs. They go on the sled dogs to hunt for food. But if a sled dogs have to work very hard, but if the sled dogs don't pull very quickly, then they would be trapped and they will not ride anymore. They also rode in some boats called the kayak and the unkayak. The kayak we still use today, but mostly for fun. The kayak they use for hunting is that they rode it to hunt for Arctic animals under the water, such as seals or whales, even small whales, and a little bit of fish and tuna. And they also use the unkayak for other reasons. They ride it mostly about sometimes for fun, but they also use it for hunting, just like the kayak. So that's about the people in the Arctic. Now we know what they eat, and also some people even follow the customs of those Arctic people, but other people had decided to, cook these. But they still follow those ideas. But some still follow I should say the present ideas. But some still the modern ideas. But some still follow the Arctic people that first lived in the Arctic. They still ride in sleds, in kayaks, and they still live in igloos. But now people in the Arctic have one life together. Now, the first thing I'm gonna tell you is about polar bears. Yes, let me tell you all about them. First of all, their weight and size first. Polar bears can weigh up to 500 to 1,500 pounds. Males weigh more than females, and they are also taller. If a polar bear stands up, it will be as tall as a one-story building. Can you believe that? And also, but still, the females can only reach about 700 pounds, but they also can reach about the size, and they still. Next, I'm gonna talk to you about the thick white coats that the polar bears got. They have hairs just like us a little bit, but they have fur. We are a mammal. They're mammals, and we know that because they have fur. Most people believe that polar bears are white, but actually they're black. That's because the sun shines on them and reflects the light. There's also tiny holes inside the fur, and then they can absorb the sunlight and bounce and reflect it until the entire skin is white. Sometimes the blubber is inside, but the polar bears are so much covered in hair and white fur and snow that you cannot see the black and gray part of the blubber. The blubber keeps them warm. They also have a layer of thick fat, like blubber, and also they also have some, I should say, they keep warm by, and they also, you may think that when they walk on thin ice, they will fall through it, but they expand their legs and still walk and balance their moves. And so that's it. Now let's talk about the third thing, the cubs. Okay, so the cubs about the polar bears. The cubs, mostly some mumps, and they are small a little bit, but they're small, but still they can, not as small as you think. When they're just about 30 months, 1 year old, or 1 year old, to 2 years old, they're almost as big as their mother, and 30 years old, they're almost as big too. And now they leave their mothers and become independent. Independent means that they work together. They leave their mama and they hunt together. Now their teeth grows and they adapt to the cold by their fur. Sometimes the cubs also like to play. They like to play. So when they're shaking their heads, it means they're saying, "Come on, let's play." And so they decided to play. They roll in the top of the hills, and they roll, even slide, and they run each other. They tumble and tumble, and they even slide on the mother's back. They quite have a lot of fun. But also, males also fight. Males decided to fight, but they also rest a lot of times. Males fight because of they look like playing, quite look like, but sometimes the males and females have to fight each other. One time, a female had a male, but the male decided to marry a female. In order to do this, they decided to have a fight. If one polar bear surrenders, they will go away and they can mate. We're still mates on their own. And that is not playing, as you thought about polar bears. And now, let us get to the final topic about global warming, how it can affect the Arctic and the life and the people and the polar bears. There are also a lot of other animals too. There are seals, and there's even one mysterious animal that have a horn, look like a unicorn. And that animal was really, not quite rare though. But there's still, some people call it still rare. But still, let's move on to the last final thing. And so, let's begin again. And we know that the Arctic is melting. Now, let us talk about greenhouse gases at first. Greenhouse gases is that they're like huge tents covering the earth, and they have plants inside it. But then the sun reflects on the rooftops and the glass, and so they get up again and get trapped in the atmosphere, like a huge tent covering the atmosphere. And so they trap the heat, and it bounces and bounces until it gets so warm. And this is called global warming, which means in Latin. Yes? And so, so we know that the ice is melting because of global warming. Scientists have studied about the Arctic also melting too. The highest recorded temperature on Earth is in Antarctica and even the Arctic. But still, the Arctic is still melting. Polar bears and people will die, and they will be trapped or flooded inside the tsunamis and floods and waterfalls. And they're trapped in the waterfalls, and the ice will melt completely until the Arctic was just completely covered with, that is oceans and waters, freezing cold waters, still melting and still rising and still rising and melting. And this is called extinction, with the loss of living things. And so we need to protect the entire world from melting. We need to protect the entire world from global warming, or it will completely destroy the world like a huge lump of molten rock until it just turns into lava and, well, just melts, like, yeah. And so we know about those life in the Arctic and how to save them. And so hope you learned a new lesson today about the Arctic. And we need to protect the Arctic from global warming, where the animals will die and they will all become endangered and become more rare. But still, the search and mystery goes on, and who more asks more questions about the life, about the Arctic, the global warming, and we know that about the one thing that is the Arctic, the two coldest poles in the world. Now this is the end. Goodbye everybody. Thank you for listening.